go ahead and get started. So welcome again, everyone. I've included the link so that you can download a certificate for attending this session. We have Dr. Walker, who is going to share some more awesome information with us in this session. So I will turn it over to her.
Thank you, Marlene. Great to be here. Good to see all of you. I see some new faces over there. If you brought a snack, you have to share though, because it's dinner time on my end. So it's great to see everybody. So we will get moving here. Okay. So this session is a small snippet of committee communication and collaboration. So basically the objectives that I'm going to go over tonight or this evening, depending on where you are, evening on the East Coast. So good evening, well into the evening. The objectives today are understanding what effective communication is, why it is important, and how to apply it for a common and defined committee purpose. That common committee purpose is collaboration. So we will look at understanding what collaboration consists of in the midst of communication and applying effective committee communication and collaboration to benefit the committee for cohesion, connection, and ultimately for learner progression. I will also review some CDS best practice policies that you are basically familiar with and some new best practice approaches and tips in order to implement communication and collaboration. So what is communicating effectively? We communicate every day, but is it effective, right? The cornerstone of conveying a message is to have another listen to that message and gain meaning and behind what is being conveyed, being able to understand the intent, and many times, more often than not, the emotion that is behind that information also. And collaboration consists of working together to achieve a common goal. That common goal stems from communicating effectively. In order to have collaboration, you have to have effective communication initially. Okay? So it's not just the information that is being sent back and forth. Communication is the glue that holds together the understanding, the emotions, and the intention of the information that is being sent. So that information is the substance of the foundation of the communication that is ultimately applied, and that application is effective committee collaboration. In order to be effective, that applied teamwork in a collective, collaborative fashion needs to be have that foundation of communication. Having the foundation of communication allows someone to have, a difficult message or analysis message of, critical analysis without creating conflict or destroying trust also. So what does committee collaborative efforts look like? It's having the foundation of being time committed, basically having the commitment to meet with chair methodologists to the committee to produce a foundation of synergy, discussions, a plan of action for the learner, meeting with the learner and reviewing all documents before sending them back to the learner in real time in Zoom to be effective for learner progression. And reviewing those documents and meeting in Zoom, setting that stage and that foundation to have collaborative efforts builds the ability to have smaller and more progressive meetings in the future. It saves both time and progression. It enables learners to progress quicker in the dissertation process. In all reviews, be certain that all changes are made, double checking before sending back to the methodologist, other committee members. Learners may sometimes skip a step, delete, overlook something. So always checking in a collaborative effort and asking questions of the methodologist, AQR reviewers is always pertinent. Oh, sorry, going backwards. Okay, so effective communication, what does it look like? It is time and it is effort. It's a two-way street. It's sending and receiving messages, and on the opposite end, the receiver sending back a message. It's confirmation of that information and understanding of that information in discussing what was heard, what was thought was heard, and application of that information. So it's a little intricate. But how do we apply it? Become an engaged listener. Becoming an engaged listener means listening with your ears, but it also means listening with your eyes. In emails, responding, phone calls, responding orally, Zoom meetings, messaging back and forth, responding orally, providing feedback in all of those facets, and communicating the understanding of relayed information, asking questions if needed. Showing your interest. That's a great tip. Showing your interest allows for further communication and setting aside judgment. Providing actionable feedback provides the cornerstone to collaborate for learner progression and also for committee effectiveness. Always confirm in wording that you understand and ask questions. Chunking works. Chunking, breaking information up in small pieces, parts, conveying that with communication in writing and orally helps to set the foundation of communication and for future collaboration. And there is a slide at the end of the slide deck that discusses chunking. You can go to that for further information to apply chunking. Great tool to use. Confirming in wording that you understand, follow through in the process. Touching base to communicate where you are in the process is very important for effective communication and collaboration within the committee. Always being aware of individual differences and personalities, delivering words very clearly and effectively, and making one point at a time. This is a very important tool to use because our brains basically can only take 2 to 3 pieces of information in at a time to make sense of it. And in light of that, making 1 or 2 small points at a time enables our brains to be able to take in that information in 2 or 3 seconds and to be able to process that to turn it into our long-term memory. So making those 1 pointers or even 2 pointers at a time allows the receiver of information to actually be able to understand it, apply it, and turn it into long-term memory. So it's a great tip and tool to use. Be willing to compromise, agree to disagree, always look for humor in the situation. There's always humor behind everything. And give and receive feedback positively. Most importantly, be empathetic and be assertive at the same time. So we listen with our minds. We're academics. We're always listening with our minds, but also listen with your heart because there are meanings behind words. There are meanings behind emotions, and respond with both in kind. So here are some of those policies that we have in CDS. We all have these foundations. I'll go over a few of these. You can refer back to these at a later date as a recap. Being available for communication with the committee at all times. Respecting that 9 to 5 business day, time frame. However, with COVID and collaborative efforts and communication, we've seen a little bit of shifting in how we are getting together with collaboration. So allowing for that wiggle room is very pertinent right now. Responding to emails within 24 hours and posting communication in the LDP. Also collaborating before sending to committee members, back to AQR, etc. And having at least 2 of those Zoom meetings per class with learners. It's also a very great best practice to chunk those down into small, more manageable meetings to get the learner moving and have that great collaborative effect in order to produce a goal for our learners. We don't want to forget about the 10-day turnaround time, business days, with a little bit of wiggle room right now also. Having a positive attitude for inter-committee communication is fantastic. That positive attitude trickles down. Being positive yet realistic is contagious. Responding and being very prompt helps connection, helps that collaborative effort. Encourage team members, and that encouragement in committee trickles down to our learners, and they see it, and it produces a wonderful dynamic with collaboration with them in the committee also. So stay current with processes, with your documents, sending back and forth, keep track of time frames, check in with committee members as needed, follow up using the LDP and GCU email to follow up also. Following up with phone calls, Zoom Messenger is fantastic to follow up, touch base. It's like walking around to somebody's cubicle. So that's a fantastic tool to use in periodic check-ins or just to say hi. It builds that connection, and it builds the effective communication that we need for best and operative communication and the operative collaboration for our committees. Using positive body language is very important, especially now with using Zoom and overusing Zoom. So that is very important to be mindful of. Returning emails the same day adds in that collaborative relationship and that process. It helps for process and communication and understanding on behalf of the committee where things are, where things need to be, and to aid the learner in the end. Checking emails daily is fantastic. And I like to check emails at the end of the day as a best practice. So it's a really good tip to see possible needs that need to be taken care of before the next day that can't be rolled into the next day. Using the sandwich method is a great tool and best practice. If you're not familiar with the sandwich method, that is on a slide at the end of the slide deck for information of where you can learn more and apply that method. Establishing the foundation, that professional foundation with what we're talking about, that effective communication is pertinent to be productive for the committee. And again, it trickles down to the learner, and working as a team is, most important. However, we all have our individual roles in the committee, and encompassing those roles, that trickles over into working together collaboratively in a team effort for committee best practice approaches, but also to help our learners in the end. So with that said, how do we promote connection? How do we promote connection based on that effective communication, based on that committee collaboration? Well, we have to look at empathy. We're all human, so we really need to listen to the emotion behind the words. We're academics, but there are emotions behind the words, and that empathy plays into the connection for that collaboration. Always confirm in wording your action steps again, follow through, touch base, communicate where you are in the process, even at the very end of the process. Always be aware of individual differences, personalities, regions, cultures, dialects, etc. Deliver words very clearly and confirm that you understand. And there's that effective communication going back and forth, because if there's not understanding, then you start the communication process at the beginning. And always summarize, because summarizing shows that you are effectively understanding what was communicated and what is being applied in the collaborative dynamic. So with that said, this was a short snippet of committee communication, effective communication, and collaborative efforts. A few tips thrown in there to apply, to try out that have been proven effective. If you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me in the future. There's information on the next slide, and I also have a slide here that you can take a look at for the sandwich method and how to apply chunking. So with that said, I'll let you take a look at the little cartoon snippet and this wonderful quote from Robert McCloskey that can apply to everything that we do in everyday life, and certainly committee work. I hope you have enjoyed the presentation, And if there's any questions or comments, feel free.
So we have some questions about the LDP. So I'll go back to that question. So there was a question about, sorry, I'm just scrolling, everyone. Oh, can you clarify the statement to post all communication in the LDP? So I did share that, for instance, when we're emailing with our learners, for me, I document that and post a copy of our email correspondence in the LDP. So that was one example. Nancy, I don't know if you have other examples.
Basically, all communication is great to facilitate in the LDP. Anything of a personal nature that would, fall into the category of email, basically. Using the LDP for committee communication also, chairs, methodologists, content experts are attached to the LDP, so they can also see what's going on and refer to submissions, questions, and the like. So adding all of that communication as ground level and foundation in the LDP is foundational, and it is policy that we do use communication in the LDP for CPS. So I hope I answered that question.
Yes.
Okay.
And we have another one. So let me just look through this one. So if questions pertain to feedback on a prospectus, do we still have 24 hours to respond? So that one was in there. So, I mean, in general, we have the 24 hours to respond to students.
In the document itself, or just if they have a question, is that what that meant? Or
yeah, sure. Maybe it's maybe if it was a question, if it's and maybe Georgiana, if you want to provide clarification, if it's a question in the document, then that would be providing, we could follow up within the feedback.
Right. You can follow up in the feedback. You can use Zoom to connect also. Zoom Messenger is fantastic to reach out to answer questions immediately. It saves time. And also you can connect in Zoom through Zoom at the drop of a hat, which is great. Yeah. And definitely answering in the document itself for clarification. And just replying to the comment in the little bubble comment also.
And I can, for anyone who needs a certificate from our previous session, feel free to email me and I can send that to you likely tomorrow. I just don't have access to it right this second. So. And then there was another question about communication about weekly topics. Should we communicate in LoudCloud?
Communication in LoudCloud is fantastic. According to policies, we put those announcements in there and you're in the discussion questions once a week. So for follow-up and speaking to any questions, responding to questions in LoudCloud within 24 hours is policy. But anything else, it's great to use the LDP and communicating back and forth because that line of communication is there and in real time that you can go back and take a look at. And also in Zoom Messenger, it's right there if there's questions at the drop of a hat also.
In fact, I think I can add to that if that's right, Nancy.
Sure.
The LDP is designed to be around for multiple years. So typically, or what sometimes might happen is there may be a conflict. Student says, well, my faculty didn't say blah, blah, blah. And we can easily go back and say, even though it was 6 months, 9 months, 2 years ago, it's very easy. And in fact, even after the student graduates, we will keep that active for 5 years. If it's done in a LoudCloud class, then pretty much very rapidly that class is archived. Now, is it possible to get it back? Yes, but it's very difficult. And if there are multiple dissertation classes to look at, it's very cumbersome. So think of this as a great way to show the history of decision-making, whether students were productive or were not as productive. So it's just a handy way. That's the reason why we created that. So we have this long-term history, because as we know, dissertations don't get done in a month or 2 months or 6 months. It takes much longer. So hopefully that can provide a little bit more clarification.
All right, we have another question. Is the communication between chair, student, methodologist, and the student's LDP accessible to everyone at GCU or just the committee?
It's for those 3 or 4 people in the committee have access, as well as academic leadership within the college. Someone who's not in that committee does not have access to any of the contents within the Learn a Dissertation page. So the answer is no.
And then we have one more question. If they are posting deliverables in LoudCloud, should they also be posted in the LDP?
Should they be posting what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Should they also be posted in the LDP?
If it's a significant document, they probably should. Again, it's showing the history that they viewed something. In fact, within the LDP, we can even look at, to determine, did a student actually view a document? Did a student actually view a comment? So oftentimes students will say, well, I never saw it. And we can go back a year later and say, oh, yes, you really did. We saw it, and you saw it on this date. Similarly, we can see a faculty's comment. I sometimes look at this as the greatest insurance policy a faculty member would ever have.
I agree. All right, anyone else have questions? Okay, I see another one. Is there a way to keep class communication in order? Alana, is for your question, on the LDP.
In order, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, Alana, if you want to just provide additional information for us, we can help with that. All right, anyone else have any other questions before we head to our next session, our last 2 sessions that are running? All right, well, lots of good information. Let me make sure for anyone, here is the certificate for attendance, and you to download if you haven't already clicked that link.